Hi, this is Dave with Excel for Geologists. This tutorial is about frequency and histograms. Frequency and histograms are useful for understanding the distribution of our data. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at the spud year for wells drilled in Teapot Dome in Wyoming. We have here a data array of our spud years. If we look at the statistics, we can see that the mean is 1978, the minimum year is 1914, and the last well recorded was in 2007. We have a total of 1,303 records. To make the exercise a little easier to work with, I've hidden most of the rows of data. And so we have a lot of hidden rows where we're skipping from row 28 to 1307. I'd like to show you a little feature of Excel. If I highlight the column of data, you'll notice that the numerical count is 25, where we know that there are 1,303 records. So you need to be a little cautious using the status bar when you have hidden rows. In order to do the frequency and histogram analysis, we'll need to set up bins. It's a bit of an art form. Some people will default to just 15 rows, some will default to 10 rows, others use the square root of the number of rows of data. In this case here, we have wells that began drilling in 1914 and ended drilling in 2007, which is a span of 93 years. So for this example, I think 10 rows of data, which breaks out into decades, would be appropriate. The number that you use in the bins represents the upper range of the bin. So, for example, 1930 would represent everything drilled from 1920 to 1930. 1940 would represent all the wells drilled from 1930 to 1940. 1920 would basically capture anything that was drilled before 1920. And 2010 here in this case will capture anything that was drilled from basically after 2000 in our data set. The frequency function will produce a count of the number of rows contained within any of these bins. And it's a fairly easy function to write out. If I click in the cell and we look up here, we can see that it has the frequency, then the data array, and then the bins array. Note that the curly cues are on this. This is because this is an array function. So let's work this out here. I'll delete these values. And so down here I have the instructions on how to do this. You'll need to highlight the cells, all the cells that are next to your bins. And then we'll type in the frequency function. Equal FR, and it kind of knows this one. I'll double click it. Now I'll put in my data array. So just come over here to the data, click on the first cell, shift, and click on the last cell, and I have the data array, comma. And now we need to highlight the bins array, in parentheses. Now, in order to do this function, you'll notice that you have to hit Control, Shift, and Enter at the same time. And I have my count. Down here I've put the sum just to make sure I got the right frequency. And if we compare that to our statistics, 1303, 1303, that's correct. Now that we have our frequency, we can make our histogram and look at the distribution of our data. So we'll highlight the bins and the frequency, go to Insert, and let's look at recommended charts. And here we have a histogram. So we can see that most of the wells were drilled in the 80s and the 90s. There were a few wells. There was a gap here. You can't even see that the number is so low of 2 count, you can't even see it visibly on this chart. Just as a matter of cosmetics, you can select different types of chart designs. If I want, I can come over here and right click and I can add data labels, and you can see the count, and now you have a chart. If you want to change the title and the axes, you can go to quick layouts and you can find a layout that you like. You can just kind of scan over them until you find one that you like, and this one has the axis titles, and here you can change these. You can put, for example, if you want to put here spud year, you can change the vertical axis to frequency, and for the chart title we can make that spud year. You really don't need this series, so we click that and hit delete. That kind of cleans it. And then maybe one last thing is you can double click on these axes, go to this little bar here, and you can change the gap width. And now you have a product that you can put into a report. The second way of getting a frequency in histogram analysis is by using the data analysis tool pack. I think this is an easier method. To find this, you'll need to go on your main menu to Data, and you'll see the Data Analysis Tool Pack. If you don't see that there, you'll need to install it. It's very easy to install. Go to File, Options, Add-ins, and you'll see you'll have some tool packs here. Click on the Data Analysis Tool Pack and select Go. Alright, so let's do the frequency and histogram analysis using the Data Analysis Tool Pack. We click on it, and you'll see there's quite a few different things you can do in here. We'll click on histogram and OK. So now we look at the histogram dialog box. The first thing it wants is your input range data, or your data array. So we'll select that. Control Shift and click the last row of data, and we have our array. The next thing it wants is it wants our bin array. So we'll come over here, select the bin array. Alright, we have that. I'll just skip clicking levels. Where do you want to put the data? Because that's the output range. So upper left corner. We'll select that. You could also, if you wanted to, you could put it into a new worksheet or even a new workbook. And you have different outputs that you can have. Or you can combine them. We're just going to do the chart output right now, and we'll click OK. And there we have our frequencies and our histogram. So in summary, frequency and histogram analyses are useful for understanding the distribution of our data. There are two ways in which you can do this. You can do it using the frequency function with your data. And remember that when you do that, you'll always have to select the entire array that you're doing and use the Control Shift Enter key combination. The other thing to remember is you cannot have any blank rows in your data when you're doing histograms. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video.